Now this video is a bit of an interesting one, and is an idea which I picked up from another channel which I'll mention at the end. This thought experiment of a video is an attempt to try and understand the psychology of how we can overcome the problems of vanity and envy, but also highlights the Nietzschean slave morality that persists within envious people towards a higher order. So ultimately this video tries to grasp an understanding of how we can overcome this problem by having a humble confidence and graciousness, but also why it is good to be blunt in remark at times, or alternatively to grasp the courage of attaining the best qualities in what have been known as some of our worst characteristics. There has always in life been a difficulty in understanding and knowing the truth, due to our empirical perspectivism, experience and subjective character. This can relate to learning things about the world, but most importantly, learning about ourselves and others. We could say that our own lives consist in the continuous striving for improvement, whether that begins from the bottom or the top of any human faculty. Our abilities from birth are not given to us by our own choosing. Thus develops a hierarchy, and due to this desire for improvement, we as a people need to conquer the most terrible expressions of our own nature. It is in common human nature that people who consciously realize that they are of a higher order need to conquer their vanity, while people who are of a lower order in a specific area of their lives need to conquer their envy. We have all experienced this on different levels and in different areas of our lives. For example, when someone is better than us in a particular sense, we become envious or resentful. Or when we are really good at something in an aspect of our lives, we become vain. But what can also be noticed is that those of a higher order, as we all are in different facets, put on a mask of false modesty against their own pride. This is to avoid the attack and judgment from the lower order, which will prey upon us through envy and then reduce us down to believing ourselves as mediocre in some way, or due to our own vain pride in talent. That is where the problem lies. You could say that this false modesty and stunted envy could be very popular today, which are both generated from a society with overbearing egalitarian values. The false modesty is not to be regarded as narcissistic false modesty, as it is different. In this case, it is only in place to avoid the attacks of the envious, and is thus produced, in effect, out of a sense of guilt or self-pity for oneself, which is then reinforced by the envious, resentful types. This happens because, as we all know, through the desire of improvement, we are always trying to become someone who we imagine to be, or become the person who we pretend or want to be. When this idealized fantasy of the self or vanity is damaged, it also damages our own self-conception. So, through this and by the powers of the envious, we internalize what is thrown at us. We deceive ourselves of fulfilling that potential, become doubtful, feel guilty, and then devalue our own ability, potential, and then join a similar class of the lower order, whereby you yourself start to become envious of a higher order, which you now believe is a place in which you do not belong. What is dangerous about this is that this process replicates itself in a cyclical manner, whereby the envious bring people down to a level of theirs, which debases and corrupts all higher order potentials. And then from this, you have a form of slave morality which breaks down the hierarchy into a mass of lower orders which would hate success, strength, nor attributes which are more objectively virtuous, or those which overcome all others. But how do we get around this problem? How do we stop the perpetual cycle of reproducing envious lower people or Nietzschean men of resentment, who are, I quote, the vengeful disguised as judges? How do we stop the reproduction of slave morality? Or more precisely, how do we maintain our confidence, relatively humble pride, and not get sucked down into the abyss? The answer, I think, is in how we view vanity, because if we get rid of excessive pride, that is self-deluding, then the resentful cannot use an idealized state of becoming to drag us down to their level of nihilism. We need to realize a form of true self-knowledge so that we do not doubt our own intelligence, which is caused by relying on an excessive pride when it is attacked. The only way one would do so is to develop a true sense of real humility, not false modesty, where you as a person understands their own strengths and talents, but at the same time doesn't fall to the attacks of one's pride and also doesn't get too high and mighty about oneself. What can be assured is that we all hold envy and vanity to a degree in certain aspects of our lives, so this does apply to most people unless you have a very strong and known character. So in a sense, to keep one's own higher developing order in play, we need to fundamentally know thyself with generosity, so that we do not run off into a Kierkegaardian infinity with our own pride, which when attacked will bring us into a nihilistic realization, but also to not succumb to the envious abyss, which is in an attempt to drag us into the deep. But maintaining such a balance within the dichotomy of pride and self-flagellation is extremely difficult. If you get rid of the vanity, you also get rid of the false modesty and the guilt, because the false modesty is only a defense mechanism against the attacking strikes of the envious, and false modesty in this sense is the source of guilt. Therefore you eradicate both vanity and the recycling production of envy. Vanity is the source of false modesty because that is the only reason why you are hiding your excessive pride. False modesty is the source of guilt because you are scared of judgment of your vanity. Therefore get rid of excessive vanity and you kill both guilt and false modesty together, which gives way for the ability to know thyself and gain true knowledge of oneself. But what is most beneficial is that you develop also a lacking care about what the envious people think and feel about you, which you could say is the new archetype of the, gracious prick. Because it is not that he or she has become cruel, which would make one a general prick, but it is that one does not care or is equally prudent in not caring about what others say about them. Because if one is in that state, the humble pride and higher power of one's own abilities can be maintained and not dragged down to the lower levels of the envious, or become hidden away out of sight from the masses. These grudging types want to replicate their own feelings within you so that you can replicate slave morality in a sense, hence why the phrase, misery loves company. By getting rid of the excessive vanity, false modesty and guilt, you can then develop a strong level of self-knowledge, where you as a person does not tip either towards infinite vanity or self-pity, which thus leads to debasement. Because by that point, you don't need to mask your higher ability with false modesty to feel safe from envy, and therefore not give a shit about what other people say to you with the intention of bringing you down. And this should fundamentally develop a strong confidence and graciousness within oneself, but also allow oneself to re-baptize only the best qualities of, let's say, of being an arsehole, which is not caring about what other people think about you in relation to your abilities. A quote from Nietzsche supports this interesting idea. I quote, "The great epochs of our life are the occasions when we gain the courage to re-baptize our evil qualities as our best qualities." End quote. Now you become confident with a strong backbone, but also humble in knowing thyself truly, or, because this is down to perspectivism, an arsehole. Yes, because the lower ordered and envious will still see you as just an arsehole anyways, because, well, they are obviously envious of your abilities, and because you will be using your relatively stable and humble pride to not care about what they say to you, because at this point, you won't be using false modesty to hide your abilities, which they think you will be doing. On the other hand, you will be seen as gracious, and only so by the people who have also taken this step towards humility, gratitude, and those who care and take pride in the higher orders in life. Or more simply, those who are not easily offended by success or man overcoming one's own struggles and failures. So there you go, a bit of an interesting idea to make you think. Don't know what to think about it completely, but I thought it would be interesting for you guys to hear, as you can base it around the idea of developing confidence and overcoming the problems of vanity and envy. This idea specifically is one that I picked up from another YouTube channel that goes by the name Caleb Beers, whereby he made a video a few years ago called Nietzsche and the Virtues of Being a Prick, which I stumbled upon and found very intriguing, so I recommend you check that video out, as this video and the ideas around it are heavily influenced by it. If you enjoyed this video and found it insightful, make sure to like, subscribe and comment down below to get involved in the discussion. Talking about discussion, you can find a link to the Thoughts on Thinking Facebook group down below, so make sure to join if you want to get involved in conversations about philosophy, sociology, psychology and literature. Make sure to follow my social medias such as Instagram and Twitter to keep up to date with everything that is going on, and also Patreon, where you can donate a minimum of $2. Lastly, a quick shout out to all my patrons. Thank you to Danielle Kazmi, The Truthism, Noah Shahad, John Bisham, Richard Walter, Mark Smith and Maggie DC for supporting me on Patreon. Thank you for watching, and I will speak to you in the next video.